What are you still holding on to? Not because it still means something, but simply because you've gotten used to enduring it. There are things we keep, not out of love, but out of fear of losing them. People who have long grown cold, expectations that have already died, roles we continue to play in someone else's life. We carry them as if it were the last duty of our loyalty. What we fail to see is this: every time we cling to something that has expired, we betray ourselves. The truth is, not everyone is meant to walk with us to the end. Not every emotion deserves to stay. And not every chapter should be reread endlessly just because we once cried on the first page. Stoicism does not teach us to forget. It teaches us to let go calmly, deliberately, and with dignity. In today's video, we'll explore the deepest layers of the art of letting go. Not to escape, but to live lighter, to move forward without dragging the past, to cut ties at the right time, not out of anger, but because we finally understand. There are things that, by holding on to them, we slowly lose ourselves. 1. Let go of what no longer serves you. Some things once lit your path, but one day you must accept they've become obstacles. A relationship that once made you feel alive now leaves you drained. An ideal that once set your soul on fire now feels like a tight garment that suffocates you. An old version of yourself so full of pride, so full of ambition, now becomes a hiding place to escape the present. And yet, you hold on, not because you still believe, but because you don't know who you'll be without them. But the cost of clinging is not safety, it's the endless delay of a necessary transformation. Letting go doesn't arrive in a single moment. It is a series of bitter but accurate admissions. I've outgrown this. Not everything that once had meaning deserves to stay. Some things were meant only to serve you for a season, and then their role ends. If you refuse to let go, you'll unconsciously keep reenacting a script you've already memorized, even when you know the ending no longer fits. It's ironic how we humans can choose to stay in pain, simply because we fear the uncertainty of not knowing what tomorrow holds. But that very uncertainty is where life truly begins again. Inside each of us is a list of things taking up space. A job that drains you, but you won't leave because you believe you won't find anything better. A relationship that diminishes you daily, but you cling to it because you've invested too much time. A social role you've carried for so long, you've forgotten what your true voice sounds like. You don't realize that each of these things slowly consumes your creative energy, your faith, and your freedom bit by bit, day by day, not loudly, but with certainty. And the most frightening part is this: you begin to call it normal. In truth, you don't need anything more to live better. You just need the courage to let go of what no longer fits. Like someone clearing out an old room, not because it's dirty, but because it no longer reflects the person you're becoming. What you choose to keep says everything about the person you choose to become. And when you continue to carry old baggage, you postpone the meeting with your deeper self, the one waiting for you on the other side of courage. Letting go does not mean being ungrateful. It doesn't erase the past. It simply says, "Thank you for being there with me, but now I must move on." It is the highest form of self-respect when you choose to leave behind what once helped you survive, to make space for what can help you truly live. Not out of bitterness, not out of regret, but with a deep clarity. Some things, if not released, will continue to pull you away from the person you were meant to become. And sometimes, loving yourself begins with firmly letting go of the very things that once made you feel worthy. 2. Clinging is often resistance in disguise. We often confuse perseverance with an inability to let go. But not all effort comes from loyalty. Often it's just the fear of being left behind. You keep holding on to something long decayed, not because you still love it, but because you're afraid to face the truth that it died long ago. And to avoid touching that pain, you wrap it in the robes of loyalty, responsibility, or even noble ideals. But at its core, it's still a form of resistance, subtle and easily disguised. Resistance makes you live as if the past could still be restored. It makes you believe that if you just tried a little harder, everything would go back to the way it was. But the scariest thing is not what has ended, it's locking yourself inside the illusion that it still exists. Clinging is a way to delay the truth. It's how you lie to yourself every morning, telling yourself that something lifeless can still be revived if only you sacrifice enough. But you could sacrifice your entire life and still never bring back what has expired. Some say, I can't leave, I still have hope. But if you have to feed that hope with pain, then what you're holding on to isn't hope, it's illusion. The more you cling, the farther you drift from reality. The harder you grip, the more you lose yourself. Silent resistance is the most corrosive. It won't break you all at once, but it slowly makes you forget what it feels like to be free. You no longer recognize the relief of a firm decision. You only know how to shrink into a safety zone that's long outgrown, where every day is a quiet repeat of nameless exhaustion. It's ironic that we're willing to pay with health, dignity, and youth just to preserve a shattered image. Not because we don't know what's happening, but because we refuse to admit we bet on the wrong thing. The ego will do anything to defend its old choices even when they're hurting us. It will call it perseverance. But if you listen closely, you'll hear beneath the clinging a quiet whisper that you're tired. That deep down, you know this is no longer home. You just haven't found the courage to walk out the door. Letting go, in this case, is not surrender. It is awakening. It's when you stop repeating the self-harm needed to sustain a structure that's already broken. When you let go, it's not because your love has run out, but because you've finally seen clearly. You choose to walk away from a battle where no one is truly fighting anymore. And in that act, you lose nothing. You're simply returning to life what no longer belongs to you, to reclaim the freedom you should never have traded in the first place. 3. Peace requires pruning. We often think peace is a state that arrives after everything is settled, when the job is stable. Relationships are healed, and our heart is no longer restless. But true peace doesn't come after everything, it comes in the midst of everything, and only exists when you know how to deliberately cut things out. It's not about adding, but subtracting. Not about controlling everything, but removing what is no longer necessary. Like a gardener pruning branches so sunlight can reach deeper, we must remove what blocks our own inner light. It's not because everyone is toxic that you need to avoid them. It's not because everything is bad that you have to cut ties with the world. It's because you start to realize your life energy is limited. And if you let it leak daily into meaningless conversations, unnecessary events, and broken relationships you maintain out of politeness, you'll have nothing left for what truly matters. Peace doesn't arrive as a reward. It is the product of discipline. The discipline of saying no at the right time, of withdrawing from things that drain you, even if they were once precious. People with depth are not harsh. They just know that keeping everything is its own kind of chaos. A mind cluttered with too much cannot become still. A life filled with every possibility becomes a life with confused priorities. Pruning is how you rearrange your inner space so life can flow more fully. You cannot feel peace when your head hosts 12 arguing voices. Your heart pulls in 6 directions, and your day is crowded with hundreds of clashing demands. Pruning demands clarity. You must face what's causing noise inside you and ask, Why am I still holding on to this? Does it nourish me, or just keep me busy? Not everyone deserves a place in your mind. Not every commitment needs to be honored forever. Not every old dream should be carried on. Some things, if kept, will only sabotage the balance you're trying to build. And when you dare to clean up, when you admit that something's role is finished, that's when you begin to make space for what's new, right, and better. Peace doesn't come from escaping the world. It comes from your ability to choose wisely. Just as light becomes sharp when it pierces through fog, your soul shines only when it's no longer obscured by unnecessary tangles. And that pruning, that's sometimes the deepest act of self-love you can give yourself. 4. Let go with love, not bitterness. Many people believe they need anger to justify walking away. That only betrayal, hurt, or insult can legitimize letting go. But there's another kind of letting go, quieter, deeper. It's when you release not out of hatred, but because you've loved enough. Not out of resentment, but because you've understood. Not to hurt the other, but because you don't want to keep hurting yourself. Letting go with love is a higher form of freedom when you no longer need to be the victim or ain, yet still walk away with grace and awareness. Many breakups don't happen because love runs out, but because self-respect finally speaks up. You still look at them with gentleness, still feel gratitude for what you shared, but you're also clear enough to see, if you continue, you'll only slowly break each other down. And when you leave with lightness, you don't leave behind any broken pieces, not for them and not for yourself. It's not fake kindness. It's compassion forged from understanding. It's when you no longer need to be right in the story. You simply become the one who lets go without tearing anyone's soul. Some relationships don't end in fights, but in a lingering glance where both silently know what's fading. But few have the courage to leave before things truly collapse. They wait for a reason. They want a clear event to justify the goodbye. They don't realize, if you wait until it breaks to walk away, it's already too late. And what you carry with you won't just be memories, but the wound of having abandoned yourself. Timely letting go is a skill. And that skill only comes to those who no longer need anger as motivation for change. Forgiveness doesn't always require an apology. And letting go doesn't need a dramatic farewell. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone is quietly withdraw when you know your presence no longer brings light. Letting go with love means choosing to keep the best parts in memory instead of prolonging the present until everything is ruined. It's when you dare to leave without slamming the door, without rewriting the story to make them the villain, just walking on. Because you now understand, some things are most beautiful when they end in gratitude, not in rage. And in that letting go, you preserve the purest part of yourself. 5. Non-attachment is not coldness, it is clarity. We are taught that to love is to hold on, to care constantly, to worry, to miss, to cling. But there is another kind of love, quiet, unforced, expecting nothing in return, and no one teaches us how to love that way. It's when you still care, but don't need to possess, still miss someone but don't need to text, still watch them walk away without feeling loss. Many call that cold, but in truth, it is the height of clarity when you no longer love out of instinct to possess, but with freedom and understanding. Non-attachment isn't a lack of emotion. On the contrary, it demands that you've endured many painful seasons just to be able to stand still without being pulled in. When you no longer need to control others, no longer need everything to match your expectations, that's when you begin to know what love is. Love isn't a leash, it's a space where people are free to be themselves, even if that means walking away from you. And you accept that, not because you've stopped loving, but because you understand that real love does not confine anyone. Some people will leave your life without explanation. Some relationships will end even though neither of you caused harm. Some things you believed would last forever turn out to be only stops on a short journey. If you don't learn how to let go without resentment, you'll live forever in the memories of what once was. Non-attachment is when you stop asking why they left and start asking, what do I need to move forward? It's not denial of pain, it's refusing to let pain take over the rest of you. In the philosophy of mindful living, non-attachment is a virtue, not emotional detachment, but a deliberate silence. When you no longer react automatically to every loss, you give yourself the power to choose your response wisely. You don't ignore your emotions, but you don't let them dictate your actions. You don't suppress them, but you don't project them either. You simply observe, accept, and let things unfold as they must. No struggle, no possession, no control. Only the understanding that all things are impermanent, and the only thing you can control is your attitude toward that change. Non-attachment doesn't make you cold. It makes you deep. You no longer need to explain, prove, or resist. You step back from the need to be acknowledged to come closer to inner peace. And there, you understand that nothing belongs to you forever. Not the people you love, not even the emotions you feel. The only thing you can do is be fully present in each moment, then gently let it go when it's time. That's not loss. That is wisdom. 6. Surrender to what is transforming. We often assume we can keep everything the same if we try hard enough. But the truth is, nothing can stay in its original form forever. Emotions shift, people change, memories fade, and you, no matter how hard you try, are no longer who you were yesterday. Life doesn't repeat itself. It doesn't stand still. It moves, reshapes, breaks down, and rebuilds without end. And our deepest suffering doesn't come from change, but from resisting it. You're not afraid of the new. You're afraid of losing the false sense of safety the old once gave you. Some things aren't wrong, they've simply finished their role in your journey. Some relationships aren't toxic, they just no longer push you toward who you are becoming. And some older versions of yourself once helped you survive the storm, but now have become a shell that suffocates you. When everything inside you has evolved, but you still cling to old structures, you're dragging yourself down to a lower level of life. Growth doesn't happen in stability, it happens in ruptures that require you to let go of familiar patterns. Surrendering to what is transforming doesn't mean you've failed. It means you've learned when to step aside. Like water that doesn't argue with the rock, but silently finds a new path. You too can keep living, just not in the same way. You can still love, but not cling. You can feel sorrow, but not return. You can cherish what was, but not let it shape what will be. This surrender is not the surrender of defeat, but of wisdom. Everything exists to transform, not to stay fixed. Your ego will resist because it craves control. It wants reasons, plans, outcomes that match your vision. But life does not sign a contract with your expectations. It unfolds on its own terms, sometimes chaotic, unjust, hard to accept. And if you don't learn to surrender to what's transforming, you'll live in constant tension, opposition, and the looped question, why me? The answer doesn't lie in reason, it lies in your chosen response. And when you pause, take a deep breath, and view all that is happening through the lens of acceptance rather than resistance, you'll realize. Within the chaos, you are being reborn. Not in the way you want, but in the way you need. And that, though painful, is a gift. But only when you dare to surrender will that gift truly be revealed. For what's new, right, and better Peace doesn't come from escaping the world. It comes from your ability to choose wisely. Just as light becomes sharp when it pierces through fog, your soul shines only when it's no longer obscured by unnecessary tangles. And that pruning, that's sometimes the deepest act of self-love you can give yourself. 4. Let go. 7. Don't fear the emptiness. Let it teach you. We are programmed to fill up with work, with people, with goals, with noise, with endless concerns. Every time we fall into silence, our first instinct is to reach for a phone, play music, call someone, or find something to do. Emptiness becomes an internal panic, not because it truly threatens us, but because it forces us to face what we've always avoided, ourselves. In the stillness of a room with no one else, unanswered questions rise. Repressed pains knock at the door. Forgotten dreams call out. And instead of listening, we look for something new to make us forget. But emptiness, if you're still enough to stay with it, is a wise teacher. It doesn't speak loudly or teach through theory. It simply strips away every mask you've worn. In that space, you're no longer someone in others' eyes. No titles, no achievements, no roles. Just you, raw, conflicted, full of flaws but also rich with potential. And in that rawness, you get the clearest view of yourself. Not to judge, not to punish, but to understand, to forgive, to move forward with more honesty. Emptiness doesn't demand action. It only asks for presence. And that's the hardest thing, because we're used to proving, fixing, improving, achieving. But when all the noise fades, only then do you recognize which voices in your head are truly yours and which ones were inherited from those who made you doubt yourself. In that silence, you also hear the dreams, long-forgotten things you once loved, once wanted, once believed in before the world taught you what was reasonable. Don't rush to stand. Sit and listen. Emptiness, if you're brave enough to stay with it, will teach you one vital truth. You don't need to be filled to be whole. You don't need someone beside you to be loved. You don't need to be busy to have worth. You don't need a plan to avoid being lost. Sometimes, the moment you accept you are in the void is the start of a new path where you carry nothing but your truest essence. And the wonder is, from barren ground, life can bloom again. But this time, not out of fear, but from the freedom you found in the space you once tried to escape. 8. Closure doesn't come from us. It comes from acceptance. Some goodbyes come without explanation. Some relationships end in silence instead of words. Some wounds are left behind with no one owning up to them. And you, without a single apology, farewell, or acknowledgement, stay stuck in a limbo, not sure if it's over, not sure whether to move on, or keep waiting. You wait for a sign, believing that if they came back with just one final sentence, you'd finally allow yourself to end it. But that waiting is the chain that locks you in the past. And the truth is, closure never comes from others. It begins the moment you decide you don't need anything more to move forward. Many believe forgiveness needs an apology, that letting go requires full understanding. But most of what breaks us offers no clear explanation. You may never understand why someone who once held your hand so tightly let go without a word. Why a relationship once full of trust dissolved without warning. And you won't heal if you keep seeking fairness from something that no longer exists. Healing doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with accepting that some doors close without you ever getting the key. And that's not your fault. Acceptance is a deep form of letting go. Not letting go of the other, but of the expectation that every story must end neatly, like in books. Real life doesn't operate with perfect conclusions. It's messy, vague, often unresolved and full of longing. but you can learn to close from within by your own decision. When you sit with yourself and say, "I need nothing more, I won't wait anymore," not because they deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve freedom. Ending doesn't come from answers. It comes from a moment of clarity when you no longer want to stay in the old story, no longer need someone to confirm that your pain was valid. You don't need anyone to take your side because you've finally taken your own. And from that place, you can close the chapter not with a slammed door of anger, but with a calm glance backward and a firm step forward. You don't need someone to return so you can let go. You just need the courage to say, "I won't wait one more second to start living again." And that is the most powerful act of liberation you can do for yourself. 9. Letting go is a form of strength, not weakness. Society teaches us that quitting means failure, that if we haven't tried hard enough, we're not allowed to stop, that walking away means we've lost. But some things, the more you try, the more you lose yourself. The more you cling, the deeper you sink into a loop with no exit. And letting go, at that point, is no longer a last resort. It becomes the wisest decision. It's when you stop acting out of pride or illusion and instead realize, continuing like this is costing your soul, just to preserve an outward image that only appears fine. Letting go is the act of someone who dares to face reality without sugarcoating it. It's when you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, not even to yourself. It's when you realize that strength isn't about rising in every battle, but knowing which battles are no longer worth your time or energy. A mature soul isn't broken by not getting what it wants, but by lying to itself that it still wants something, even when deep down it has stopped believing in it long ago. To let go of something that once mattered is never easy. You'll face countless inner voices. You can still try harder. What will people think? You've invested too much already. These voices don't come from truth. They come from fear. Fear of loss, fear of emptiness, fear of not knowing what comes next. But fear has never been a valid reason to hold on to anything. And if you have to force yourself every morning to keep alive something already dead, you're hurting yourself under the illusion of perseverance. That pain, if prolonged, will eventually destroy the very part of you that once burned the brightest. The weak hold on out of fear. The strong let go out of understanding. You don't need to wait until everything collapses to stop. Wisdom is stopping while you're still conscious enough to walk on your own 2 feet rather than being knocked down by circumstances. Letting go takes nothing away from you. It returns you to freedom where you can begin again, honestly, unburdened, unchained by what's already gone. In a world that praises those who never give up, sometimes the bravest act is to step back at the right time and preserve the integrity of your heart. Because in the end, life is not about how much you can hold on to. It's about how clearly you can choose what to keep to nourish yourself, and what to release in order to live as a whole being. And sometimes, strength doesn't lie in what you fight for, but in what you dare to let go. 10. The victim role will drain your power. When we're hurt, our first instinct is to withdraw and replay the story in our heads like an endless draft. We repeat it to friends, to family, and even in the silence of being alone, as if by telling it enough, the pain might ease. But there's a thin line between healing and being stuck. And when we begin using that wound to define ourselves to justify stagnation, negative reactions, or prolonged helplessness, we've stepped into the most dangerous role, the victim. The victim role doesn't require us to change. It only asks that we play the part of the wounded. And that seems easier, less pressure, more sympathy than facing the truth. We may not control what happened, but we are fully responsible for what we choose next. Stay in the victim role too long, and helplessness starts to feel familiar. You let others dictate how you feel. You live in reaction, no longer in creation. You wait for someone to come and fix it instead of walking through the wreckage yourself. And day by day, hour by hour, your personal power erodes, and you don't even notice. Maybe you're right. Maybe you were truly betrayed, hurt, abandoned, unfairly. But being right doesn't make you grow. Being right won't set you free. Being right just keeps you stuck in a place that no longer nourishes you. What helps you move forward is not being right. It's choosing to end the old story and start a new chapter. And that will never happen if you still need someone to admit they were wrong before you'll let yourself be free. Stoicism never taught us to be victims. It taught us to face reality without illusions, excuses, or delay. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." What robs your power isn't your circumstance, it's how you hand it over to others through blame, complaint, or waiting for someone else to change. When you stay in the victim role, it feels like you're protecting yourself, but in truth, you're stripping away your own ability to rebuild. Stop telling the old story as a list of accusations. Tell it as a journey you survived. Then close that chapter, stand up, and move on with no need for anger, no need for anyone to apologize, no need for applause. Just tell yourself, I will no longer let this define who I am. Because only when you release the victim role can you reclaim your place as the main character of your life. And that's when true power returns. 11. Step out of the old story you've memorized. You've replayed it in your head hundreds of times, the story of what they did, the injustice that happened, the way things could have been different if someone had been kinder, if life had been fairer, if you'd been luckier. At first, that story helped you make sense of what happened, but over time, it stopped being a tool for clarity and became a cage. A story repeated often enough becomes your identity. And you're no longer living, you're just reenacting. The old story may feel safe because it's familiar. It gives you a sense of control over how you interpret the past. But be honest, does it make you feel freer? Does it help you love yourself more, trust others more, live more lightly? Or are you clinging to it to avoid facing a bigger question? If I'm no longer this person in that story, then who am I? There is no ready answer. But if you don't dare ask, you'll forever live as a dependent of a chapter that ended long ago. Stepping out of the old story doesn't mean denying what happened. It means no longer letting it be the axis around which your inner world revolves. You begin to rewrite, not to sugarcoat, but to open. Open to a new chapter where you're no longer limited by what hurt you, where you can act without needing permission from memory. And that action, even if awkward, even if unclear, is the boldest declaration that you're no longer willing to live a script you've already memorized. You choose to live truthfully, and to do that, you must release the old plot. 12. Your mind writes your future. Every thought you repeat is another stroke on the canvas of your future. No one sees it instantly, but every internal dialogue you choose to believe quietly shapes how you walk, how you love, how you react, and ultimately, how you live. If your mind is filled with regret, you will live unconsciously trying to fix the past. If you're full of fear of loss, you will build everything around you defensively. And if you don't believe you're worthy of good things, you'll reject every opportunity convinced it's just a trap. The future isn't defined by what happens. It's defined by how you think about what happens. I once held on to a story for years, not because it still mattered, but because I wasn't ready to face how empty life might feel without it. Whenever sadness came, I'd replay it in my mind like an old film, as if rewinding it enough times would somehow restore justice. But no one came back, and nothing became easier. Only I remained shrinking more each day beneath the shadow of a version of myself that had already run out of strength. There's a moment I'll never forget. One evening, I sat alone in a dark room. No music, no phone, no one beside me. And for the first time in years, I could hear my own heart. It wasn't angry, it wasn't needy. It asked a single, quiet question. How much longer will you wait before choosing to live in the present? That question opened up an entirely new space inside me. Not because I had the answer right away, but because I stopped waiting for someone else to untangle what I'd been caught in. From that moment on, I stopped trying to forget the past and simply learned how not to live inside it anymore. I no longer needed an apology to forgive, nor a perfect ending to move on. I only needed the courage to stop telling the same old story. And maybe you do too, not to be stronger than anyone else, but just strong enough to outgrow the version of yourself from yesterday. If you found value in this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what comes next. The journey of mastering your inner world is a quiet one, but never a lonely one. And you don't have to walk it alone.